Good evening. My name is Olesia Kromychuk. I'm the director of the Ukrainian Institute London, and I'm also a fellow of the RSA. So it's a true pleasure for me to see these two institutions collaborating together once again. And my huge thanks to Andy Haldane and his absolutely wonderful team for making this collaboration possible. This is our third joint discussion following previous conversations on justice. In 2023, we hosted Alexandra Matviichuk, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, who challenged us to rethink justice structures across the democratic world. And last year, we hosted a discussion here on ecocide, both as a global issue and a crime committed by Russia in Ukraine. Tonight, we turn our focus once more to Ukraine as a lens through which to examine global challenges. The fragility of democracy, the urgent need to strengthen international solidarity and collective security, and of course, the pursuit of lasting peace in Ukraine. And I'm sure that justice will continue to be at the heart of tonight's discussion. In the context of the calls to ceasefire, we must remember that peace without justice is no peace at all. In fact, it's a fragile truce and a possible invitation to an even larger war. Without justice, there's a feeling of betrayal, and betrayal breeds resentment, revenge, and political manipulations of trauma by the very people responsible for causing that trauma in the first place. A secure Europe is impossible without a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. When I speak at public discussions in Ukraine, much like this one, they often begin with a minute's silence for the colleagues lost to Russia's war. I have sat on many panels with empty chairs, marking the painful absence of fellow writers, scholars, activists, either killed or imprisoned by Russia. We need conversations like this one about our shared responsibility for collective security so that there are fewer empty chairs, so that by the next anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukrainians can focus on mourning their losses and not on having to actively fight for their sovereignty and basic freedoms. Freedom is fragile. The more we come together to defend it, from the battlefield to the courtrooms to debating spaces like this one, the greater our chance of safeguarding it for the generations to come. And so I'm extremely grateful to all of you here at RSA House and all of you joining us online for being part of this important discussion. And it's my absolute honor to introduce our distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dmytro Kuleba, Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs between 2020 and 2024, and now Senior Fellow at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard Kennedy School, and Associate Professor at the Sciences Po, who will be in conversation with BBC correspondent, presenter, and author Clive Myrie. Thank you both.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here and great to see you all. What a week it's been, eh? What a week it's been. Dmytro, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here. You became foreign minister in the teeth of the COVID pandemic back in 2020, as if that wasn't bad enough. In your worst nightmare, could you have ever predicted what has eventually come to pass? Not just the events in Ukraine, but also seemingly the fracturing of a global world order that has underpinned peace and security since the end of the Second World War.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. Of course, I thought that pandemic was the worst thing that could happen because the whole world went on a lockdown, like for the first time in memorable human history. And that was quite an issue. there was a moment when we received an email from a stranded tourist in Colombia who literally wrote to the ministry's official email. I was exploring the jungles of Colombia for 3 weeks. Now I'm out. I don't understand what is happening. Tell me, what should I do? And when this email was brought to my attention by consular officers, I thought how much I want to be her, you know, and not to be involved, not to be there in this first 3 absolutely crazy, insane weeks of the pandemic. But I must tell you that you know, we should always look for a silver lining, right? So I must tell you that COVID helped us to prepare for the war, for the invasion. We knew how to operate under scrutiny without being connected to each other. And in that sense, COVID was helpful, but of course, you could never have imagined that while going through the pandemic. I have the one kind of weakness. I read too many history books. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I was aware that the world is moving towards a new phase. I just sincerely hoped that I would not find myself, that I would have found myself in the middle of it while being outside of it.
Right.
You know, and this was not the case. I came to the conclusion that there would be the next phase of the war between Russia and Ukraine in November 2021. But I have to be completely honest with you. I thought it would have been a large-scale Russian offensive in Donbass. Right. So because I approached it from a purely rational perspective, and I thought it would make sense. He would conquer more territories. He would drastically destabilize Zelensky inside. Pro-Russian parties would have taken the opportunity to come to power. So I had a picture that made a lot of sense. And I was waiting for the war, but did I really expect the scale of what was going to happen? Mm-hmm. No, I must tell you that up until very last days, I thought that there would be a war, but it would be raging in Donbass.
Even with the world seemingly moving in concert together in battling COVID, you felt that there would still be a fracturing after that when it came to Ukraine's future and its relationship with Russia?
Yes, because this is kind of the natural reaction of humans' mind and body. You know, after the moment of ultimate mobilization, you just need to
you open up.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is what is going to happen to Ukraine after the war,
right?
Because we were unprecedentedly mobilized. Mm-hmm. We were as a nation, we have demonstrated the best any nation can get, can find in itself in the first year of the invasion. Now we are still mobilized, but we're extremely tired, we're exhausted. So when the war is over, you will see these fractures in the Ukrainian societies come out and go to the surface. So it's kind of, you know, if you accept the idea that states are social creatures, that they consist of human beings, men and women, then they all act similarly. So if humans behave this way, it means in the aftermath of the crisis, it means that states will behave in exactly the same way. And pandemic put so much pressure on, led to such strong mobilization that kind of going nuts was inevitable after the pandemic.
After the pandemic. What do you put, how do you characterize the reasons for Ukraine and the world being in the position it is in now? What do you put that down to? How do you explain it?
That's Listen, Ukraine is fighting for its survival. It understands the cost of the fight. Putin is fighting for his place in history. He understands what he is fighting for. Because if he fails to subjugate Ukraine, he will become the first Russian Tsar ever who failed. This is what is at stake for him. The problem with the West is that it seems it still doesn't understand what it is fighting for and what is the price it is ready to pay in this war. And until it doesn't, we will be where we are. With all my gratitude and appreciation to everything our partners have done for us, I do not want to undermine that, but if war is still raging, it means that we all have not done enough. And it means that we need to decide how far are we ready to go for the sake of winning it. Which brings us to an even broader kind of picture, like what is going to happen to the West if Ukraine loses. It means that the weakness of the West will be exposed to the whole world. It means that what Putin and what Presidents Putin and Xi have been saying for decades will become evident to everyone. And I always try to remind whenever I have the opportunity, but it doesn't really resonate and sell, but I will still try to make another attempt. I believe people in the West forgot that everything they have comes from the outside. Their security and prosperity is based on historical advancement of the West globally. So if you retreat from the West, from the world, if you retreat from the institutions that brought prosperity and security to the West, to the mechanism, from the mechanisms, from the rules, you are you're setting yourself on a trajectory where first you will begin to lose prosperity and then security will vanish. I've been saying it in many places, no one listens to me, so either I'm preaching to the deaf or I'm wrong. History will judge us.
Okay. Americans would say their prosperity comes from their own grit and determination and MIT and Harvard and whatever. Donald Trump would probably say that too. He wouldn't be pointing to European prosperity being the reason that America is prosperous. He wouldn't be pointing to the international framework that has governed us all since the end of the Second World War. He would say it's just down to American brilliance. And we don't need a transatlantic alliance. We don't need NATO necessarily, because we can fight these wars on our own.
Absolutely.
That's why his approval rating is through the roof at the moment, despite everything he said about Europe and Ukraine.
Well, I'm not aware of a country where you can win elections by saying that prosperity and security do not come from the hard-working, talented people of this country, right? But we kind of have a different conversation here, so we can dwell on this issue from a broader perspective. No, Romans were the Romans because they controlled the world as it was known back then. America is what it is because it entered into world wars in Europe and in the Pacific and found a way to capitalize on this politically and financially. It wasn't the Soviet Union who brought to life financial institutions which still run more or less run the world, right? The world economy. It was the United States. Europe would have been a different place if the United States did not launch a Marshall Plan for Europe, which was not a charity per se. We know that. It was an investment that the
Americans think it was charity.
This is what national politics actually implies, making the point that we are the good ones and everyone else is just exploiting us. But the truth is that when the West is speaking of the need to defend rules-based order, and many in the world want to believe the West and to join forces in defending that rules-based order, we also have to recognize that these rules are written by the West. And if the West decides not to defend it, it will be gone. Rules will be written by someone else. And actually, I believe it would have already happened, but the West is lucky that it's anti-West, its antithesis, anti-West, has too many differences and divergences inside. So like if we take G7 as impersonification of the West, and we take BRICS as anti-West, the difference between two until the arrival of Donald Trump was that G7 was very much united around consensual understanding of what they are standing for, while strategic interests of G7 members were always aligned. This is where the strengths came from. But look at BRICS. I mean, it grows. It has some very, very, very powerful powers inside, but their strategic interests contradict each other. And therefore, the West is lucky that anti-West cannot pull itself together and get really united in fighting it back. But if the West itself decides to retreat or to fracture inside, which seems to be happening, of course, it will only make the job of anti-West easier.
Is this a transitory thing? Trump will be gone in 4 years.
I firmly believe that Trump is not an accident. His first presidency could be seen as an accident, and many in Europe believed so, and the strategy was basically to sit him out, right? Which worked. Biden was back, everyone was excited, and life seemed to be back to normal. But the return of President Trump is a message that this is how America feels and thinks. And it's not an accident, and whoever comes after him will either follow in his footprints one way or another, or will have to take into account the views of half of America in his policies. So the biggest mistake we can make today is to believe that we can sit him out again. No, this is a different, he is not an accident in history. He is not the transition. He is at the frontier of the new world that is emerging in front of our times. I was giving an interview today to a Japanese journalist, and he asked me whether I agree that world order is changing. 20 years ago, I went to the university and I listened to my professor telling me how the world order is changing. I think it's time to stop and to say the world has changed. This is the watershed. 20th January 2025 is the watershed in human history, because this time President Trump learned the lessons of his first presidency, and he will not let it go away. You know, he will not let deep state outfox him. And the overall kind of picture in the world is also different. So the world is not changing, the world has changed. This is it. I don't know what else has to happen for people to recognize that.
Does Europe get that? Are you confident that European leaders understand what's happening right in front of their eyes?
It seems to me they understood that Trump came after them as well, following the speech by J.D. Vance. And I think it's very important to understand that J.D. Vance did not criticize Europe. He criticized this Europe, this political setting, these political elites, their voters. They want different Europe, and they seem to be ready to invest in changing Europe the way they want it to change. Look at what Elon Musk is doing for Alternative für Deutschland, for example, right, in Germany. So, and they will continue to do it. So, we were talking about Russia meddling in European elections. I'm afraid we are moving towards a situation when the United States will be meddling in European elections. And they are already doing that kind of in Germany, if you look at Germany. So I really saw kind of awakening in the statements and in behavior of some European leaders. But this is so much against the political culture of Europe to go against America, to kind of lead without being led by America, that there will be some difficult moments ahead. But I hope that we will find a solution to that, because if we don't, then we are kind of doomed. So we have to. And President Macron convened the summit. Prime Minister Starmer made some very loud statements. Ursula von der Leyen made a commitment. German parties leading in the polls are also pretty firm. So they all realize that it's not just about Ukraine, it's also about them. Yeah. But there are procedures, there are different hurdles on the path from realization to action. And that is what still remains to be done. The problem is that Europe has no time to deliberate. Europe has to act. Its clock is ticking. It's here. It's purely mathematical now.
Let's focus on Ukraine for a moment. What were the mistakes that were made in the West's attitude to the war in the first few months?
No, I think the biggest mistake was made before the war. And the mistake was the non-recognition by the West that Ukraine belongs to the West. This is it. I mean, there would be no war if Ukraine was not separated from the Baltics and Central Europeans in early 90s, when they were put on the track of accession to both EU and NATO. There would be no war if the West did not kind of believe that Ukraine is Russia. There would be no war if the West was not viewing Ukraine through the prism of Russia and their relations with Moscow. I will always remember an episode from 2011. I was a young and promising diplomat back then, and so I was allowed to kind of witness how real diplomacy is made, working as assistant to the foreign minister. And there was a delegation from the European Commission in 2011 who came to Kiev, and they said, listen, we really want to put Ukraine on the track, on the trajectory towards obtaining visa-free regime with the European Union. But we have to somehow synchronize it with Russia, because we can't allow you to travel freely in to Europe while still keeping Russia under visa restrictions. So you guys have to work together with the Russians and somehow get it done together. That was the approach. That was the view. The association, 2 days ago, we commemorated the anniversary of the shootings on Maidan and the deaths of the Heavenly 100 in 2014. So this whole revolution started with the refusal of Yanukovych to sign the association agreement. But people forgot that association agreement did not promise Ukraine's membership in the EU. It did not even recognize the so-called European perspective. So this is the mistake. This is why we are where we are. Ukraine is no angel. We made our own mistakes, right? But since I have the luxury of answering the question about mistakes of the West, I will stop here.
We'll get on to Ukraine's mistakes maybe a little bit later on. But in that regard then, isn't Donald Trump simply being honest and open in his attitude to the whole situation? He is seeing the Ukrainian conflict through the prism of whatever Vladimir Putin and whatever Russia wants. that is what you're saying the Europeans have been doing and other nations have been doing for a long, long time.
Yeah, it is part of it, and I don't think that President Trump deserves to be named and shamed for every word he says,
yeah.
because it is to a great extent about speaking out loudly about the issues which political culture and what the French call politesse demand to be concealed from the eyes of the public.
Yeah.
Yes, that's certainly the case. I will always remember reading a big interview with President Barack Obama, his interview for The Atlantic, called The Obama Doctrine. And it's a huge piece published in 2016 after he left the office, in which he literally says, you know, Ukraine is more important to Russia than to us, and this is why I took this stance. If you're ready to go to war with Russia over Ukraine, then you have to speak up about it. And, I mean, we have to be very, very honest about the role of President Obama in it. So he said openly, he said these things openly after leaving the office, right? Very few people read long interviews these days, so very few noticed. But he actually admitted what was the driving force or the guiding principle of his foreign policy on Syria, on Ukraine, which led to the consequences. Because I'm confident if there would be no Syria, Putin would not launch large-scale invasion in Ukraine. Syria is the watershed moment for Putin's decision that he can get away with invasion, because President Hollande and President Obama were threatening red lines. Putin and Assad were crossing the red lines. Nothing happened. What else? What else can I do? What kind of lesson do you get from it? So yes, Trump is saying openly what many politicians believed. With all my sympathy and appreciation of President Biden, when Trump said that NATO's membership for Ukraine isn't realistic, I mean, he does a very unusual thing for him. You know, he aligns with Biden's policy, because throughout all this 2 years of the invasion, the whole kind of substance of the fight with the Americans on NATO membership was how to give Ukraine something, but not invitation. So Trump did not say anything new to me, but he just said it in a very straight way. The problem is not in his openness. The problem is that the negotiating strategy that he seems to kind of manifest so far is Russia-leaning. This is the problem, and that is something that will take us to some very, very difficult moments.
If there is some kind of deal for Ukrainian minerals or whatever, and President Zelensky goes through with the deal that Donald Trump wants, what kind of a peace deal do you think that could lead to?
And this is the problem. No one knows that. This is the issue. No one knows the plan. And I think a good reason of Ukraine's concerns is that it doesn't really understand what it gets. How does the deal strengthens their negotiating position?
Which is why he's not signing it.
Yeah, I mean, the chances that this deal will not be signed are close to zero. It will be signed.
Yeah.
The more time it takes to sign it, the narrower the corridor for Ukraine will be. It could have been different, but this is where we are. So the question is not in the deal itself. The question is that my feeling is that Ukraine doesn't understand how it improves its position in a broader conversation.
We're all wondering that.
No one understands that.
Yeah.
I think actually it's funny, but you know that these deals, Ukraine already has an agreement on these minerals with the European Union. In the summer of 2021, Europe and the European Union entered into strategic partnership on Ukraine's minerals. And it's exactly the same minerals. We don't have two. So, and my biggest kind of question, I'm just sitting and waiting, and now I'm publicly making the point, like, guys, where are you? Why are you allowing European minerals to become fuel for America's economy instead of turning them into a fuel of European economy? Because everyone is focused on what J.D. Vance said in Munich, but 4 days before that, he said something even of no less importance in Paris at the summit, at the AI summit. He basically said to the Europeans that they should not compete with American companies, that they should lift restrictions, like deregulate. Otherwise, if they do not do so, then they will be considered as hostile to American AI emerging economy. So there is no partnership in it. There is AI, US and Europe will find themselves in, or already found themselves in, AI competition. And these are the resources, these Ukrainian minerals, they are essential for AI-driven economy. So we are talking about the future here. The problem with this deal is perceptional, because, to be frank, I mean, we are selling something that will have to be delivered in, I think, no less than a decade, the best. Anyone involved in extraction knows that not a single company will invest a single pound, dollar, or euro unless it has 200% security guarantee for its investment. And because of the geography of where these minerals are located, I'm afraid there will be no 10% security guarantee for the safety of operations for years to come. So it is not as bad, this deal is not as bad as it is perceived, but yeah, it turned into a mess. And now it's really difficult to get out with a solution, to come out with a solution in a decent way for both sides.
Sure. Is the only security guarantee as a result of any deal worth its salt NATO membership? Is that the only thing that would really prevent a future invasion?
As we speak, it is, but when NATO is put to the test, or when NATO is put to the test, it may evaporate.
Evaporate?
Yeah, absolutely, because
So being a member of NATO is...
No, because it was never kind of really tested after the Cold War. I mean, with all my respect, and the trust in NATO was always based on one line. It is not on Article 5, but on one line, reading, "It is a sacred duty of the United States to defend every inch of Allied land." Right? It's not the Article 5 that gives confidence. It is the commitment of the United States. Are we confident that the United States are still committed to defending their allies in Europe? I kind of doubt it. Europe, because, and I agree with Trump on this, I mean, Europe lived on relying on US security for too long, is disarmed today.
Yeah.
I mean, Europe can be taken more or less with bare hands.
Yeah.
With all my respect, I don't want to undermine it, but The only army that has battle experience in Europe is Ukrainian army. And it doesn't matter how good your army is, it will always be worse than the one that has battle experience. And Russia does. So if Ukrainian army lays arms down, the only army, battle-hardened army in Europe, present on European soil, will be Russian, with an influx of North Koreans, which is also the reality that we have to come to terms with. So the question is, will NATO stand? Will the promise of NATO stand? If it does, then NATO will remain the best security guarantee available on the market. And then we should go for it. But I do not want to imagine a situation when it doesn't stand. I want it doesn't stand the test. And we are lucky that Putin is still busy in Ukraine and is not putting NATO to the test.
Okay, so if not NATO then, President Zelensky's talked about a European army. Does that make sense? And do you have European leaders who are willing to spend that kind of money?
Well, the French president has the idea, but I'm not sure that he has the money to spend single-handedly on this. Listen, I'm actually more concerned about another development. I'm more concerned whether NATO itself will kind of fracture into the way US Army and approaches will develop and the rest of NATO allies. Because basically NATO is EU plus the US and Canada. So this European wing of NATO can encapsulate or can become more consolidated while remaining inside of NATO. It does not necessarily have to be done outside of it.
But are they willing to do that? Are European leaders?
No, I don't think. I think that's a too bold idea for them. No, you have to understand one thing. When the war started, and I realized that the best way I can help my country as foreign minister is not to negotiate with the enemy, but because it didn't make sense to negotiate with them, but to negotiate weapons for Ukraine. That was a new kind of job for me, but essentially it's the same. Like the subject matter of negotiations is different, but the things you have to do are the same. This is what you get trained of, and I was not afraid of diving into this entirely new environment. It got really scary when I realized that there is very little to negotiate, because Europe has proudly positioned itself as the country of this state-of-the-art or cutting-edge military technologies. The problem is that these technologies existed in the quantities necessary for arms exhibitions taking place simultaneously in different parts of the world.
That was it?
That was it. No, that was the scariest moment. When you realized how quickly warehouses will run out of reserves because they were not replenished for decades.
But you're talking to the Americans at the same time, right?
Yes, we were, of course, but with the Americans it was different because they were guided by non-escalation, by not giving too much, but giving enough to survive, but not giving too much to go beyond that. And listen, of all the stories, the whole West, the almighty West, the whole NATO did not find 10 spare Patriot systems 3 years into the war. What are we talking about? I was in one meeting with my fellow very good friends, very committed diplomats, foreign ministers of G7, where I walked into the room and I said, guys, you have the radar to a Patriot. and you ask for that radar to be delivered so that you can equip the Patriot, and Ukraine will get it. And it lasts for 6 months. What are we talking here about? It's not about millions of rounds of ammunition. For 6 months, 2 G7 countries cannot fix an issue with one radar to a Patriot system that Ukraine needs. In the end, this is more telling than all the kind of big conversations about defense industries and about our resolve and that we will stand with you by as long as it lasts. These are kind of things that we really had to handle, and you all have to be aware of that. So today, there are serious issues with the capability of Europe to defend itself. And they need to be addressed immediately, because there is no more time left.
And because European leaders understand that America is not necessarily going to be there.
That's exactly the point. And you have to accept it as the new reality. It's not in present continuous anymore. It's here. It has arrived. It's present. Simple.
What kind of a deal could Ukraine accept?
I'm never going to tell it to you. Why should I? Why should I compromise position of my country even by dwelling on that? This is the whole thing in diplomacy, you know, to make a smart face.
Is this your smart face?
Yes. So, no, I'm not a minister, but I'm not going to tell you. The thing is that you have to understand one thing. Anyone designing a peace deal for Ukraine must take into account the risk of Ukraine blowing up from the inside as a result of the deal.
Right.
And
because some won't accept it?
Yeah, because if part of the society is not going to, if it will be so bad that part of the society will find it unbearable to, not just unbearable to tolerate it, but bad enough to act against it, there is enough of Ukrainian patriots in the country. And allowing Putin to benefit from this scenario after all the sacrifices would be absolutely inadmissible. So this is something that we are a strong nation of utmost of remarkable courage, but we are human beings in the end. And we've been fighting this war for 3 years. And this is why I do not, frankly, accept any criticism towards the people of Ukraine and the way we fight the war. You do it yourself.
But you mentioned mistakes earlier. What mistakes?
We can talk about the West more.
You're not going to tell me about that possible peace deal. You're not going to tell me about the mistakes. Come on, man. Come on. Name one thing that went wrong.
Strategically, of course, we played this, what Ukrainians know as multi-vectoral foreign policy, courting Russia and Europe and America simultaneously.
Try to play all sides off each other.
Yes, yes, yes. So, and that gave an excuse. It's kind of a vicious circle. So on the one hand, it gave the West an excuse to believe that they should not view us as a part of the West.
Yeah.
And it gave us the reason to blame the West, that we're compelled to do it because they don't see us as part of the West. So we're just making circles on that. We did not really believe, not as political class, but as a nation, that a war of this scale is possible. And this is why today I'm making the point to while speaking to Western audiences, that the worst mistake you can make is to continue to believe that it can happen to anyone but me.
But you, yeah.
Yeah. The war, the era of peace is gone. The war is a new normal. And it's not that wars can be in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa. War can be here as well. As difficult as it is to believe in it, to begin to believe in it, I come from the mistakes that we made as a nation. Ukrainians like to complain that the authorities did not warn them of the upcoming war. But we didn't want, we didn't want to see it coming. We didn't believe it was coming. I'm sure if this line ends up in on Ukrainian social media accounts, I will be crushed. But I mean, that was true. Those who wanted to, those who read the news, they saw the risk.
Yeah.
That was imminent, as Washington put it. And then I think during the war, the mistake was, but I understand it's this is what politics kind of forces you to be. We all lived on the hope of a quick war, that it will end soon. We did not prepare ourselves
in victory, as well as defeat.
Yes. No one believed in defeat after the first week of the invasion.
Yeah.
So, but we kind of always started the new year believing that the war will end by the next year, by the end of this year. And on the one hand, I understand you have to keep people hopeful, but some wars do not end quickly, unfortunately, and people did not prepare themselves for this.
The government wasn't prepared, the armed forces weren't prepared, the nation wasn't prepared.
Well, the armed forces knew what the war looked like since 2014 and 15. No one was prepared for this scale of the war, like full-fledged, like all front. This was the issue. And I must say, to the excuse of our government and the people, that I remember very well our meetings in Munich on the 19th of February 2022, when the Americans were telling us straightforwardly that the invasion is going to happen within days, and our European partners were adamantly, unquestionably telling us that the invasion would not happen, and that the best we can do is to stay calm and do not do anything that would allow Putin to use it as an excuse, as a provocation coming from Ukraine.
But with this information coming in, what are you thinking?
No, I have no doubts that we have some ambassadors here, former ambassadors to Ukraine in the room. I'm sure they were in the loop as well. Americans, Brits, and Canadians were of the view that the war was coming, mainly based on the American intelligence. And the rest of Europe was telling us that there would be no war, and they were honest in that, because Putin undertook one of the most successful deceiving the deception operations in human history. He personally told Scholz and Macron that he was not going to invade, that it's all Anglo-Saxon Russophobia. This was, and now you find yourself in Kiev, you receive a call from the US telling you that, guys, the invasion is imminent, and then you receive calls from Berlin, Paris, some other capitals who tell you, sit straight, do not panic, nothing is going to happen. That was the reality we were operating in. And these were the choices that we had to make.
I'm going to open it up to the floor for questions in a second. In a second, because we've got questions as well coming in from online. I just want a final point. How do you, I know you won't tell me what Ukraine would like to see in any final peace deal, but how do you see this conflict ending?
If you if we're talking about like the real end, the removal of the threat of the war,
Yeah.
then I'm afraid only one of us will survive. I don't want to scare anyone, but we are just irreconcilable, Russia and Ukraine, because freedom is not reconcilable with oppression. Subjugation is not reconcilable with independence. And this is the battle. What is at stake in this war is Ukraine's statehood on one side and Russia's imperialism on the other side. So one of us will be gone. Either the state of Ukraine will be gone or Russia will cease to exist as an empire. It will continue to exist in a certain form, of course, as much as I wish it wouldn't, but the reality is different. But this is irreconcilable. So this, if we are speaking about some short-term objectives like a ceasefire, or that is doable. It's difficult, but doable. I mean, in a nutshell, ceasefire is very difficult, but doable, but possible. Making it hold is close to impossible, and long-lasting peace is impossible. Yeah. So whatever is going to happen in the coming months, it may signify a pause, but it will not be the end of the war.
The whole thing.
This is the reality that we have to take at the very kind of basic level of our understanding of what is happening.
All right. Okay. I'm going to open up to the floor now. Lots of hands, which is wonderful. I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions in one go, and then if we can remember the question, we'll answer. Okay, lady there. Yes, you.
Hi, hello. Thank you for that very insightful talk. My name is Oksana. I'm an associate professor at UCL. I wondered what you thought about Europe going it alone. Is it feasible? Can we do it without the United States and see a free and independent Ukraine?
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's take another question. Gentleman here with the red tie, just in front here. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned Syria as being quite a critical watershed, but I'd like to put the point that I think Georgia was actually the key one, because the West did nothing then, and Georgia was also in the same, do I look towards Europe, NATO, or do I have to get sucked back into...
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, sorry, your point about America as well. World War II, America did not join the war to support Europe. It joined because of Japan attacking Pearl Harbor. So they've already told us that they're not in a hurry. So why are you surprised in a way that America is behaving the way it is today?
Okay, and let's take, I think it's a, yes, you, yes, hi there.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Kvitka. I'm a postgraduate student at the Department of War Studies at King's College. I was wondering, what do you think are the implications of Russia's decades-long authority in the information space of the Global South going to be like for a future confrontation between the West and Russia?
Great. Okay, so can Europe go it alone?
It cannot and should not replace America in its entirety, but it can do far more than it does now. The 3 things that will be absolutely impossible to replace are missile Patriot interceptors in sufficient quantities. There are just no such reserves in Europe. Spare parts for American equipment already delivered, and American intelligence. With all my respect to MI5, MI6, James Bond, and others, I mean, Americans have real eyes, and it will be very hard without them. On everything else, over time, Europe must build its capacity. It's not a question of if, it's when. And Putin knows that.
Yeah.
And he does not need strong Europe.
Yeah.
You see, he did not come after us only. he also came after Europe because he needs to expose the weakness of everything he's opposed to the whole world. Which brings me to the last question, and then I will address the second one. The West is losing what is called the Global South. I mean, I'm sure my colleagues from FCDO, RSA, and other places could disagree with me, but I saw it with my own eyes. I mean, when diplomats in Africa and Asia ask me to ask Western capitals not to approach them on the issue with requests to support Ukraine, because the only reaction they get is the desire to do completely the opposite of what they ask. And they told me this. They said, Dmytro, every time you want something, call us. Because when we are approached by London, Paris, Berlin, and others, our first instinct is to do completely the opposite. It's gone. And it's gone to a large extent because Russia and China control social media, read and watched by the youth in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So traditional Western media are still strong in those parts of the world, and they can give the impression that everything is fine. But the next generation consumes information from the sources which are under someone else's control. And of course, there is a bunch of arguments about double standards, historical responsibility. Exactly. I'm not even going there because it's an endless conversation. But ultimately, these are the two kind of manifestations of why it's. And if Ukraine loses and the weakness, the inability of the West to defend its friends is exposed to the rest of the world, then even more countries will begin to drift towards those who they believe should be addressed for help. So this is where we are. On Georgia, yes, of course. I mean, Georgia was very important. It's just that Syria was more recent. This is why I mentioned it. On America, I may be wrong. I mean, everything I said may be wrong, but I think FDR was willing to help Europe, but he could not make the point because America was not attacked. So the attack on Pearl Harbor kind of served as a reason, because if it was only because of the Pacific, he would not land on the beaches of Normandy. He could have said, "I'm busy in the Pacific." But this is the uniqueness of the moment, is that in all wars that have taken place in Europe in the 20th century, America was always the game changer. First World War, Second World War, Balkans. American leadership was a game changer to establish peace. It wasn't the Europeans who negotiated Dayton agreements, right? It was the United States of America. Yeah. And for the first time since early 20th century, since we remember ourselves, since we remember all the foreign policy doctrines that we continue to follow, Europe is abandoned by the United States, and it cannot count on the United States as game changer. This is where we are. This is the new world.
This is the new order. 3 more questions. Lady here in the front.
Clive, although I look in good shape, I have very bad memory. Can we take one after one? Because I almost forgot the first question while listening to the third one.
Yeah, but I've written them down, man.
Good. Then I will refer to your help.
I've written them down.
Great.
So yeah.
Teamwork.
No, follow my lead. Yes. Follow my lead. Okay.
Yes, thank you. My name is Anna. I'm a student of international relations at the University of Sussex. And my question is, do you think that Russia-Ukraine war is a graveyard for the US-led order?
A graveyard for the US-led world order?
US-led world order. Okay. And gentleman over there.
Good evening. I just wanted to ask you the question. You mentioned that you mentioned the importance of America, and I was just curious. What do you think? Will the Trump succeed in at least sort of securing the peace in Ukraine with pure negotiations with Putin, with a very little involvement of Ukraine? Because right now it just seems like it's like the conversation of two bosses with very, very little involvement of Ukraine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And gentleman there.
Hi. In a world which has been described as G0, where there are strong men in America, strong men in China, potentially strong men in India, who's our strong man in Europe?
Okay. Who's our strong woman, potentially?
I'm so sorry, strong man.
Indeed. Right. Okay, so the war between Russia and Ukraine, is this a US-led graveyard?
That
in terms of
sounds,
global security.
Yeah, that sounds more like a clickbait headline than a question from a student of international relations and security. But if I am to respond in a clickbait manner, it can be. It can become.
Okay.
But it's not predetermined. We had this conversation ahead of this discussion. Nothing is predetermined. I mean, everything, we are the ones who make the decisions.
Yeah.
I teach a course at Sciences Po, and my students struggle to believe that there is no place in a country or in the world where smart people in the possession of all information of the world, cold-blooded, with mathematical kind of bloodness in analysis, coldness in analysis, come together and make impeccable decisions. There is no such place, neither here in the United Kingdom, nor in Ukraine, nor in Washington. Nothing is predetermined. It's all in our hands, in our ability to minimize the mistakes we make and to maximize the number of right decisions we make. Everything is reversible if we have stamina and the ability to look around without rosy glasses.
Indeed. All right. Okay. Do you think there can be a peace deal secured simply with Trump talking to Putin and Ukraine not being involved?
No. There will not. But it's Trump looked around and he thought, who do I need to make a deal? I need Russia because Russia is on the attack. So we can question how he is handling it.
On the attack or under attack?
On the attack. Well, listening to him, it seems that it is also under attack.
Yeah.
But he went to Putin. There are other reasons why he did it, but he did to Putin because he believes that if he makes a deal with Putin, Ukraine and Europe will have no other choice but to accept it. And that kind of assumption can and should be questioned because whatever deal he will make, it will be impossible to enforce it without Ukraine and Europe.
Yeah.
And everything you see is an attempt to put both Ukraine and Europe in a position where their corridor for their window for not accepting the deal will be kind of so narrow that even air will not flow through it.
Yeah.
This is what he's doing. It's pretty clear. All of this escalation towards Zelensky, towards Europe, it's kind of telling them it will get even worse if you do not agree to what I'm saying.
Well, there's a suggestion that Mr. Trump is heading to Moscow for Victory Day, May the 9th.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right. Okay. Who is Europe's strong man or woman?
But Europe was by purpose designed in a way that there would be no strong men or women on the horizon. Europe, following the Second World War, was built on the assumption of strong institutions because we kind of had enough of strong leaders, right? So this is where then generations were built, were raised on books and lectures telling them that strong institutions are far better and safer option than strong leaders. And I would even tend to agree with them, especially when I was a student. But real life taught us that for strong institution and weak leadership is important for is good for the peace of time, for the times of peace. But it doesn't really work for the wartime. You need leaders, and the scene is open. President Macron definitely plays very active role in this open scene, on this open stage. But it's like this open mic competition, you know, you just come, pick up the mic, and whoever sounds more persuasive gets it. Prime Minister Starmer quite recently spoke up in a very unconventional way for, if you take into account that a year ago, the entire Europe was kind of attacking Macron for the idea of sending troops to Ukraine. So when it comes to Europe, we are in this open mic competition. Anyone can get it. Anyone who can make things work.
All right. Well, open mic competitions, that's a good way to end it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dmytro Kuleba.